what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about first of all what is happening in your body during perimenopause and why things might start feeling different at this stage. Why your usual exercise that you had been doing up until this point might now not be working so well anymore. What types of exercises we really need to focus on during this stage. How hard and what intensity you actually need to be working at. And then Angela's going to talk about nutrition strategies to support muscle, bone, and recovery. So, what I would like, and Angela would like you to leave here with tonight, is to really understand what you actually need to be doing. So we want to know what we need to change now, what we want to actually focus on at this point, and then how we want to move forward through this plan as we go through menopause. So, a little recap of what is perimenopause. So, it is the transition phase, obviously leading up to menopause. Sometimes it can get a bit confusing about what menopause actually is. There's 3 stages. So you have perimenopause, which is, like I said, the lead up. You have postmenopause, which is obviously once you've gone through it. But menopause itself is defined as 1 year from when you've had your final period. So if you had your period yesterday and you don't get your period now for another 12 months, from that moment, that 12-month point in time, you are then considered postmenopause. Okay, so you won't know that you've gone through menopause until you've actually gone through it. It usually starts in your 40s, but sometimes it can be your late 30s or it can be closer to 50. And as I said, it's not necessarily one moment in terms of menopause, but also it's that lead up in perimenopause for about 4 to 8 years time. So, what's actually happening inside your body? So, we have obviously our hormone estrogen and we have progesterone. So, what happens in our reproductive years is they move together up and down, as we can see there from the diagram. Now, when we hit perimenopause, that's when estrogen starts to fluctuate. So, it goes up and down. And it really throws off, as we can see here, that balance that we have with progesterone, okay? Now, the changes to those hormones then is actually what drives your symptoms. So, in terms of symptoms, you don't have to participate if you don't want to. But, if any of you do want to, if you experience at least one of these symptoms at the moment, does anyone? Yes, thanks Fiona. So, the most common thing to note if you are perimenopausal, first of all, is your change in periods, okay? So, if your periods start to become heavier or lighter than usual, or they're not coming at the regular time they usually would, that's probably the first sign to notice that something might be changing. Other things that can be impacted include sleep changes, and obviously from that, fatigue levels. We get changes in mood, so irritability is one of the main things. Brain fog, and then also those hot flushes and night sweats as well. Now, a lot of the time when clients come in and they're in this phase, they say to me that they are really frustrated being in this phase of life. So these are some of the common things that I tend to hear with my clients in this phase. So I'm doing the same workouts, but nothing's changing. I feel weaker than I used to, I'm more sore, and it takes a lot longer for me to recover. I keep picking up little injuries along the way, and I don't know why. And my body just doesn't feel like mine anymore. And I think that's probably the one I hear the most at the bottom there. So, let's connect the dots now. What's actually happening? So, as estrogen declines, we find that it's now harder to build and maintain muscles. Your tendons and joints become stiffer and less tolerant to load, and that's actually what's causing the injuries happening. Your bones need more stimulus to stay strong than they did before. And your body takes longer in between sessions to recover. Now, if we continue doing what we're doing at the moment, and maybe just going for walks and doing Pilates and things like that, what we will see is we'll get that gradual loss of muscle mass, we'll get that reduction in bone density, an increase in that injury risk, and functional everyday sort of activities that you do just start to feel that little bit more challenging, okay? Now, we won't see this happen really quickly, it'll happen slowly over time, so you might not notice it until much later down the track, but that's why we want to talk about it now and address it now, so that when we get later down the track, we're not addressing it then, okay? So, why is this important? Now, a lot of people, when they're going through these changes, especially with the changes that happen in terms of weight distribution around the tummy, they want to make it about aesthetics, which is great, but Our main thing we want to think about is actually the future years. So thinking about as we then start to get older, we want to be staying strong. We want to be independent. If you think about your kids having kids, grandchildren, we want to be able to play with them and prevent injuries from happening before they actually happen. So strength and bone loss now means that it's going to be much, much harder later to rebuild that. Okay? Now, diving into actual strength training and why it's important. Okay, so all those systems that we just talked about before, strength training works because it targets all of those systems, okay? It rebuilds and maintains our muscle. It provides the load that we need to stimulate the bones. It improves that tendon strength and resilience, and it supports your metabolic health. And it is probably the most effective tool that we have at combating these changes that are happening in perimenopause. But this is kind of what I touched on before. So not all exercise is equal, okay? So a lot of the time, again, when I have an initial consultation, they might come in and they will say that I'm exercising a lot at the moment. I'm going for walks every day with my dog, and I'm going to Pilates 3 times a week, which is fantastic. It's so much better than obviously doing nothing. However, like I said before, the load that we need to be lifting and doing exercise at needs to be at such a specific level that those things don't provide enough load to stimulate the bones, okay? So it's not about necessarily doing more exercise in the week, it's about doing the right kind of exercise. Because I know that sometimes life is busy and things pop up and are in the way, and so it can be really hard to find time to fit all those things in. That's why you want to start thinking about, okay, I actually need to be doing this strength training, maybe instead of Pilates right now. When I have more time in my week, maybe then I can go back to Pilates, or I can do more walks, but the strength training part is something that we have to include in our week. Okay, so there are 4 key components that I want to focus on for the rest of this time we have together. So, strength training we're going to dive into a little bit more. We're also going to talk about the importance of balance training, impact exercise, and posture. Okay? So, for our strength training, it is the foundation of everything that we need to be doing at this stage of life. So, what it actually does and why it matters, it maintains our muscle mass, it keeps the bones themselves strong, and like we talked about before, when it's becoming harder to do those everyday functional activities, it helps combat that change that's happening. So, what kind of strength training do we actually need to be doing? This is the important stuff here. So, you ideally want to be doing 2 to 3 sets of 5 to 8 reps, says the research. I tend with my clients to do a little bit more in terms of sets, and I like to start on about 8 reps when they're first introduced to an exercise, and then reduce down to 5 or 6 reps. You want to be training at that 75 to 85% of 1RM. So 1RM essentially is if I had weights in my hands and I was doing an overhead press, if I could only do 1 overhead press and couldn't do a second one, that's a 1RM. Now, I'm going to do 75 to 85% of that. That can be really hard to try and work out. So what I like to say is you want to do 1 to 2 reps in reserve. And what that means is that when you get to it, people who see me already will know that I say, if you get to 5 or 6 reps, you want to feel like you only have 1 or 2 reps left in the tank. If you have any more than that, and if you're getting towards 5 to 10 reps left, it's just not the right load that I talked about that we need to be at to see those changes happen with our bones and with our muscle. Ideally, you want to be having a bit of rest in between those sets, about 1 to 2 minutes. But what I find, especially if you're poor on time, is to pair exercises together. So this works best, or what it's saying here is essentially if you did a squat and you did 4 sets of your squat and then moved on to another exercise, between each set of the squat you'd want 1 to 2 minutes rest. But if you pair an exercise together, so if you do a squat and an overhead press together, because they're not opposing muscle groups, but different muscle groups, you can then do one and then the other with very minimal rest in between, which is a bit more time efficient. Now, we want to be doing this 2 to 3 days a week. So I often have people coming and seeing me once a week. Ideally, we really need to do that second session, if not, doing independently a third session as well. Once is better than nothing again, but it's just not going to get you to that point that you need to be with your bones and your muscles as quickly and efficiently as we would like to see. Now going back to that 75 to 85%, the research also states that when you're lifting at that kind of intensity, it really, really should be supervised exercise. So again, people will come in and say, okay, well, can I do this independently at a gym? Yes, you can, but if we're lifting at those heavy weights, if you injure yourself, if you do something wrong with the incorrect technique, that's obviously not ideal. And also I find that people will work a lot harder when they are here with someone pushing them to do those last 2 reps. I had someone in today actually who said the same thing to me, that they got to about the 4th repetition and they went, oh, I don't know if I can do more, and then they got 2 more out and they said they wouldn't have been able to do that if they were doing that independently. So I think that really shows the importance of coming in, being somewhere like here or seeing a PT or something like that where somebody is watching you do these exercises. With our strength training, we also want to focus on our fundamental movement patterns. So we want to focus on squats. So obviously a squat movement is a squat. A hinge movement, so a deadlift. So if you haven't seen this before, it's when you push your bottom backwards and lean your chest forward. A push movement, so like a push-up or an overhead press. A pull movement, so your rows, your bent over row, a lat pull down, and a carry. So we have our suitcase carrying an object in one hand and it's trying to pull you one way and you're resisting that. Or you might do what's called a farmer's carry, where you have weights in both hands and you're walking along. Impact exercise. So a lot of people tend to miss this out in their training because they've had knee injuries or there's been some other maybe pelvic floor issues, or people have been telling them in their lives, this is probably not what you should be doing. However, impact is really, really the thing that helps our bones. So if we think about our bones, when we're doing an impact exercise, it causes really, really small amounts of damage in the bone, which is not a bad thing. And what that does is it tells our bone building cells, sends them a signal to say we need to build more bone here. And that's how bone becomes more dense, essentially. Okay? So, why is it important? As I just said, bone responds best to impact and load, and without it, your bone density will decline a lot more rapidly. Now, in terms of what this looks like, 50 impact loads per session. So, what that means is that when it says divide into brief bouts, what that means is that if I was doing, again, 4 sets of an exercise, I would want to be doing maybe like 10 to 15 repetitions per set if I was pairing it with something. So let's say I'm doing, again, a squat. I do my 6 squats, and then I'm going to pair that with 10 to 15 jumps down like that. Okay? By the end of that session, you will have got your 50 impacts in. And if they want you to do it a minimum of 3 days a week, that's fine because you're already doing that with your strength training anyway. Okay? Now, what exercises what this could look like in terms of exercises? Foot stomping, so that's more of like a lighter impact option, or your heel drops. Those are usually the beginner ones I give. And those would be for anyone who hasn't had an experience with impact, so if you're not a runner, or you don't walk a lot frequently, I would always give that. Or if you have any spinal fractures, so if you have osteoporosis and you know that you have spinal fractures, I would probably start very, very light. And then we can get into more your jumping. You can stand on a box, jump down from a box. You can do skipping, you can do hopping. Anything that sends a vibration from your feet all the way to your head, and I like to say to people, it makes you feel like your brain is shaking, that's how much impact you need to be getting. And if you can see here, we want to actually be getting the equivalent of 2 to 4 times your body weight. So it's a lot of impact that we want to gradually progress towards. And I say gradual progression because if you were not experienced with impact exercise and you jumped all the way to doing a jump down from a step, your body will probably go, what on earth is happening here? I don't like this. I'm going to respond negatively to this. And that's why we do our gradual progression. All right, balance training. So this often declines a lot earlier than what people think. And you might go around in your day-to-day life and go, oh, I'm walking around fine, I feel like I've got pretty good balance. And then some people might try doing a single leg stance, and they might realise, oh, this is actually feeling really unsteady. And until you actually practice that and try it, you might not even know how quickly your balance can decline. So why it's important to improve it? Obviously reducing falls, especially as we get older. It increases our stability and it increases your confidence. So a lot of our older clients as well really come in and it's such a scary thing when you feel like all of a sudden you've lost your balance and now you can't do all these activities that you would typically be able to do in your everyday life. It can feel quite scary. So again, it's better to get on top of it right now rather than later. So what this looks like. Now, I know when you see that, minimum 3 hours a week, you're thinking, oh my goodness, 3 hours of standing on one leg every single week. Absolutely not. It is fine because that is included in your resistance training and your impact exercise. Okay? So, balance can also look at like things like step up. So if you were doing a step up onto a step, that's a single leg exercise. A lot of single leg exercises are considered a balance challenge, depending on how hard they are. But that's the next point. It needs to be something that is challenging for you. And so one of the main things I say to people is that if you can stand on one leg and hold that there and start to think about what you're going to have for dinner, what your family's doing tomorrow, it's a balanced exercise, but it's not challenging enough and it's not doing anything for you then. Okay? So it really needs to be something where you're having to wobble and think about, okay, I really need to stabilize here at my ankle to not fall over. That's how challenging it needs to be. So we want to also look at different types of balance. So we want to look at balance where we know where we're going in the next step. So what we call like a star balance. We know we're going to step forward. We know we're going to step to the side. We know we're going to step backwards. Okay? Then we have our reactive balance. So that might be you're standing on one leg and someone's standing in front of you and throwing a ball to you. So you don't know where that ball's going to come. We have our dynamic balance. So that's moving. So that might look like your heel to toe balance as you're going along. And then we have our functional balance, which is things like balance on one leg and reaching forward, okay? Things that translate to everyday life. So, as I kind of touched on there, single leg balance, heel-toe walking, leaning and reaching is star balance. Another thing that's really important is challenging the surface that you're standing on. So I'll often say, if standing on one leg feels really easy, try and put a foam pad, or if you're at home, put a pillow underneath you. You can fold a yoga mat 2 times in half and stand on that, and that will add a lot more challenge. And then dual tasking, so that being doing something else while you are balancing. So if you're standing on one leg, you might be wrapping a weight around you. You might be throwing that ball back and forth at someone or at a wall. Something that's making your brain think about 2 things at once is also really important and probably one of the best things we can do because, again, it translates into our everyday life. We're not often thinking about how am I balancing in this position. Oftentimes we're running around not thinking about what we're doing, and it takes that little step over a curb and tripping over to then fall, which we don't want, obviously. Now, posture. This is something that you might not notice right now, but does decline quite a bit as we get older as well. I think anyway in this day and age when we're sitting on computers and sitting on phones and you're in that forward rounded position, we do start to lose a lot of the strength in our back muscles. And it can also cause a lot of issues with back pain as we go on as well. So, we also want to make sure that, we want to do this because we want to maintain a strong and upright spine and reduce that leaning forward and rounding forward, reduce our strain on our joints, and also protect against spinal fractures as well. So, what does this look like? So, again, 2 to 3 sets, 10 to 15 reps, 2 to 3 days per week. Same or similar to those strength and impact exercises. So again, all can be done together. Really important to be looking at our back extensor muscles. So back extension is going backwards this way. There's both the strength and the endurance. So the endurance is actually a big one. Another client that came and saw me today who is playing golf has been having a lot of issues with her back pain in terms of getting sore. And we worked out today that was the reason why, because the endurance in her back, she wasn't able to put it in that position of extension for long periods of time. And so that's something we definitely want to focus on. So how we do that is shoulder blade squeezes. So you can even do this while you're sitting at a desk, thinking about having your shoulder blades back and squeezing them together, feeling those muscles squeeze behind here. I'll often say, like, pop a pencil or think about putting a pencil between your shoulder blades and holding it there. Back extension, so I like to do lying on your tummy and trying to lift your chest up off the ground and holding for a few seconds. Your bird dog is when you're in a sort of 4-point kneeling position, reaching your leg and opposite opposite arm forward. Really good for our erector spinae muscles that run along the inside of our spine, but also our core muscles as well, which is really important. Our glute bridges, so I'm sure most people know a glute bridge, lying on your back and lifting your hips up to the sky. And then our banded pull apart, which is a really good one if you have a resistance band at home, holding in front of you here, pulling those arms out to a capital T, and again, getting that squeeze between the shoulder blades. And those are all things that you can really do anywhere, anytime, okay? So, why, again, touching on coming and seeing someone like myself or a PT, anyone like that, why it's important. Number one, as I said, the load needs to be appropriate. And if we're not hitting that 75 to 85%, or the 1 to 2 reps left in the tank, it's not going to be doing what we need it to do for our bones, and the bone density will continue to decline. Technique matters for safety and effectiveness. So again, if you're lifting at those heavy loads and you're doing it incorrectly, and it might just be that you're fatigued that day. You might know how to do it, but it might just be, you know what, I was feeling really tired and I did it incorrectly. If someone's not there to catch that and to watch that, that's where things can go wrong. Alright, and then if we're doing it unsupervised, what might happen then? We might stay too light. So like I said, it's quite often, and I'm sure people here have felt it before, if you train by yourself, you might get to that point where you feel, okay, yeah, I'm feeling tired now, and stop then, rather than pushing those last few little reps where you're actually at that max fatigue level. And also doing too much too soon. So you get the opposite side of that where you go, okay, I'm feeling really, really good today, I'm going to jump a few levels here. We don't want to jump too quickly, too soon, because again, the muscles and joints, bones, everything cannot respond that well to big changes in weights. Yes. So, the checklist that you have on your sheet. Can you tell me if anyone here, raise your hand, if you ticked every single thing off on that checklist? No? No? Did you? How about you, Fiona? Have you ticked every box so far? No. So, I would say, if you did tick every single box of those, then I'd say, great, keep doing what you're doing. If you have not, that is where we can help. It might just be that you want to come in and know what exercises you can be doing. It might be that we have our women's bone health class that you might want to join, being in a group environment. It's really lovely and nice. Or it might be that you know what, I'm not going to be doing these exercises at home. I know that life's really busy and I often put things to the side, which is totally normal, totally fine. But that's where coming in and seeing someone like myself can really help you, because all you have to think about is I need to book that one appointment time and I just need to show up and be there, and then Hannah will take care of the rest of that. She can plan all the sessions and I know that I'm in safe hands then. And that way we know that together we are hitting all those points on that checklist.